She closed the tab and pressed her palms against her eyes until colors bloomed behind them. The knock on the door made her flinch. "It's just me," Mia's voice called. "I brought food. Please tell me you've eaten." Aaliyah opened the door and stepped aside. Her friend came in carrying takeout boxes and a look that was equal parts concern and disbelief. "Girl," Mia said, setting the food down, "you are officially trending in 2 countries. Do you realize what that means?" Aaliyah gave a small, humorless laugh. "That my face belongs to the internet now." "That you're famous," Mia corrected. "Infamous maybe, but still." Then, seeing Aaliyah's expression, her tone softened. "Hey, I'm kidding. Are you okay?" "I don't know," Aaliyah admitted. "It's like my life isn't mine anymore. People are turning it into a story I don't recognize." Mia hesitated. "Did he call again?" "Not since this morning. He said he'd handle it, whatever that means." They sat on the couch, the takeout smell filling the small room. Outside, sirens wailed somewhere far away. "You like him, don't you?" Mia asked gently. Aaliyah didn't answer right away. She looked down at her hands, remembering the rooftop breeze, the way his voice softened when he said her name. "Yeah," she whispered. "I really do." "Then you need to hold your head up. These people don't know you. They're chasing a story, not truth." Aaliyah nodded, though the words felt heavy. "I just don't want to be the reason his world falls apart." Mia leaned forward. "Maybe you're the reason it finally makes sense." That night, after her friend left, Aaliyah sat on the floor by the window, laptop closed, phone silenced. Outside, Miami pulsed with life, cars, laughter, waves, but it all seemed far away, unreachable. Her reflection in the glass looked calm, but inside, she was shaking. She didn't regret meeting him. Not the coffee spills, not the long talks, not the balcony confession. But she did fear what came next, because she could already feel the ground shifting beneath her feet, and for the first time she understood what it meant to love someone whose life was always one headline away from breaking. She whispered to the night, half prayer, half promise, "I'm still here." By the time the next morning arrived, the noise outside Aaliyah's apartment had become part of the air itself. Her phone kept lighting up with alerts she didn't want to read, and the television anchors repeated the same lines in different tones of authority. "The CEO of Kglobal is expected to make a public statement within the hour." She hadn't even known he was back in New York until the broadcast showed him stepping out of his car, cameras flashing against his black suit. The sight made her breath catch. He looked controlled, focused, but she could see the exhaustion under the polish. She turned off the sound and stared at the screen anyway. Every news station ran split screens. One feed from Kglobal headquarters, another showing the talking heads speculating about the mystery woman, and a smaller corner of the screen with scrolling social media opinions. It felt unreal, watching strangers analyze her smile, her clothes, her ethnicity, as if she were a product on display. One host asked, "Do you think this could hurt his credibility in Asia?" And another replied, "Depends on how he spins it." Romance humanizes power. Aaliyah closed her eyes. Humanizes power. That was what she'd become, an accessory to someone else's brand. She got up and began pacing, her bare feet making soft sounds on the wooden floor. Mia had called earlier and begged her not to look at the comments, but curiosity had betrayed her more than once. There were kind messages, yes, people who called their meeting fate, others who defended her dignity, but there were also cruel ones. When the timer on the microwave beeped, she realized she'd made coffee she hadn't touched. She carried the mug back to the couch and sat, wrapping both hands around the warmth as if it could hold her steady. The broadcast switched to a live view of a press room. Reporters filled every seat. The company's logo glowed on the backdrop. Someone announced that the statement would begin at noon. It was only 11:40. Aaliyah stared at the countdown graphic in the corner of the screen. 20 minutes had never felt longer. She thought about calling him, but what would she even say? "Good luck? I'm sorry for existing?" No words felt right. Instead, she whispered a different kind of hope, to herself, to him, to the quiet space between them. "Tell the truth," she said softly. "Please just tell the truth." Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Keep your doors locked. The media might come to you next. Her heart lurched. For a moment, she couldn't move. Then she looked again and saw the number belonged to Minjun's assistant, the same polite woman who had handled his flight bookings in Florida. The note was a warning, not a threat. Aaliyah drew the curtains, checked the latch on the balcony door, and sat back down. The television showed him now, standing behind the podium, lights catching the edges of his suit. Cameras clicked like rainfall. For a heartbeat, he didn't speak. He just looked at the crowd, the microphones, the chaos. Then he looked somewhere slightly above the lenses, as if he could see through the screen and straight into her living room. Aaliyah forgot to breathe. And then, at last, Minjun began to talk. The room hushed the instant Minjun began to speak. No tapping keyboards, no murmured questions, only the steady rhythm of camera shutters marking each second like a metronome. "Good afternoon," he said, his voice low but steady, carrying easily through the microphones. "I'll be brief." He paused, eyes sweeping the crowd before him. Reporters, investors, strangers, each waiting to see how he would save his image, how he would spin the truth. "I am aware," he continued, "that photos and stories have circulated over the past 24 hours concerning my personal life." A ripple of movement went through the room, the faint scratch of pens, the click of recording lights. "I have always believed that what defines a person is how they act when the world is watching," he said. "And what defines a company is how it treats the people who stand beside it." He rested his hands lightly on the podium, as if steadying himself. "The woman in those photos is not a rumor. She is not a mistake. She is someone I met by chance, someone who reminded me that there is life outside of meetings and contracts. She deserves respect, not speculation." The words landed softly, but they struck like thunder. For a heartbeat, even the cameras seemed to hesitate. Aaliyah sat frozen on her couch, the mug cooling in her hands, watching him speak her defense into the world with a grace that made her eyes sting. "She is not a public figure," Minjun went on. "And while I understand the interest surrounding me, I ask, no, I expect, that same interest not to invade her privacy." He exhaled slowly, the faintest tremor in his breath. "I will continue my work with K Global as planned. My responsibilities as a leader haven't changed. But I will not build a life ruled by fear of headlines." He looked directly at one of the cameras, the same one broadcasting into Aaliyah's living room. His gaze softened, almost imperceptibly. "I owe my grandmother, my family, my board, and perhaps most of all, myself, the honesty to say this. Sometimes, the things we don't plan are the ones that make us human again." Then he nodded once, stepped back from the podium, and the press room erupted, questions, flashes, voices calling his name. But Minjun didn't answer another word. He turned, thanked his team quietly, and walked out through the side door, shoulders straight, expression unreadable. On her couch, Aaliyah pressed her hand against her chest, feeling her heartbeat crash against her palm. He hadn't said her name, but he had said enough. Tears slid down her cheeks, uninvited but not unwelcome. For the first time since the chaos began, she didn't feel small. She felt seen. The elevator ride back to his top-floor office felt longer than usual. Minjun stood alone, watching his reflection tremble faintly in the mirrored walls. His tie was loosened, his expression unreadable. On the surface, he looked composed. Inside, the adrenaline hadn't yet settled. He'd done it. He had spoken. And for a few minutes, the world had been silent enough for truth to matter. When the elevator doors opened, the silence shattered. "Sir, the Seoul board is on the line. CNN wants a follow-up statement. Investors in Tokyo are threatening to delay the merger if—" "Enough," Minjun said quietly. The noise cut off immediately. His assistant, Min-hee, handed him a tablet with headlines flashing in multiple languages. CEO Kong defends mystery woman with dignity and poise. Investors divided after emotional speech. Public applauds humanity. Markets show concern. He skimmed through them quickly, the corners of his mouth tightening. The business world didn't care about grace. It cared about control. And he had just defied the script. Patch the soul call to my office, he said. The door closed behind him as the video conference began. The boardroom in Korea appeared on screen. 12 faces, mostly older men, stiff with concern. Chairman Kong, one began, we understand your statement was made with emotion. However, this has already cost us 3 points in the morning trade. I'm aware, Minjun said calmly. Another board member leaned forward. You should have denied it, Minjun. The markets crave stability, not scandal. I didn't inherit this company to lie my way through it, he replied evenly. An older woman, Mrs. Jang, his grandmother's oldest friend, sighed. Your father built this foundation on restraint. The public must believe you can separate personal from professional. I just did, Minjun said. You hired me because I'm not my father. There was a brief silence. Then another voice spoke, colder, smoother. Ethan. He sat at the far end of the boardroom table in Seoul, wearing that same mild expression he always wore when his knives were hidden. Minjun, he said, tone sympathetic. No one doubts your intentions. But leadership requires discipline. Your personal life is now a global topic. You've handed our competitors ammunition. Minjun studied the screen. You mean you'll hand it to them? A flicker, the smallest tightening of Ethan's jaw. Then the fake smile returned. I'd never do anything to hurt this company. Of course not, Minjun said quietly. You only ever act in its best interest, even when it bleeds. The room fell still. The older board members shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Jang cleared her throat. Gentlemen, this isn't productive. Let's reconvene after the numbers stabilize. The call ended. The screen went dark, leaving Minjun alone with a faint reflection of his own face. He sat back, fingers steepled under his chin. He had expected backlash, but not from inside his own ranks so quickly. He'd seen Ethan's fingerprints all over the unnamed insider quote earlier, and now he could feel the man circling, waiting for a slip. A soft ping interrupted his thoughts, a message from Aaliyah. I saw the broadcast. Thank you. No punctuation, no heart, no exclamation, just quiet sincerity. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Are you safe? He typed.
Yes. Don't worry about me.
Just take care of yourself. He smiled faintly. Even now, she was the one steadying him. He looked out at the ocean, dark and rolling beneath the sunset. The battle was only beginning. The board, the investors, Ethan's quiet sabotage. But beneath all of it was the strange calm of knowing he had finally done something that felt right. For the first time in his adult life, he hadn't chosen strategy. He'd chosen truth. Seoul, 10 p.m. Mrs. Kong had not moved from her armchair since the broadcast ended. The television was still glowing, now looping expert analysis and market updates, but she wasn't listening. Her teacup sat untouched, steam long gone. He said it. She murmured to herself. The fool actually said it. Her longtime housekeeper, Mrs. Park, hovered by the doorway. He spoke well, madam. With respect. Mrs. Kang's mouth twitched. Respect doesn't calm shareholders. She rose slowly, crossing to the window that overlooked the quiet city. But, she sighed, he looked like his grandfather just then. Same fire in the eyes. She remembered the boy who used to hide behind her skirts during board dinners, the one who always asked, why do we have to lie to people to make them like us? He'd grown into a man she barely recognized and yet entirely understood. Her phone rang, a video call from one of the directors. She let it ring out. She didn't need more men explaining damage control. What she needed was time to think. She turned back to Mrs. Park. Find out who leaked those photos. Quietly. I want names, not excuses. Mrs. Park nodded. And if it was someone close to the company? Mrs. Kang's gaze hardened. Then we remind them that this family does not crumble from gossip. She returned to her chair, finally taking a sip of her cold tea. Her pride and her worry wrestled in the silence. She wanted to call Minjun, to scold him, to tell him the world would never forgive a man who chose love over duty, but something in her chest whispered that perhaps this was the first truly Kong thing he'd ever done. She closed her eyes and murmured, You'd better be right about her, my grandson. Florida, 9 a.m. The storm in Miami had softened overnight, leaving the streets washed and bright. Aaliyah sat on her balcony, knees drawn up, the sea breeze lifting her curls. She hadn't slept much, replaying every second of his speech. The world was louder now, reporters outside the building, neighbors whispering in the hallway, yet she felt oddly calm. His words had turned chaos into clarity. Her phone buzzed with dozens of new messages, but one stood out, a simple text from an unknown Korean number. I am Minjun's grandmother. We should talk. Aaliyah's pulse jumped. For a moment she thought it must be a prank, but the message continued. He has made his choice. I need to know if you are strong enough to stand beside him when that choice costs him everything. Aaliyah stared at the screen, her throat tightening. There was no accusation in the message, only challenge, a test wrapped in elegance. She typed and erased several replies before settling on one. I don't want to cost him anything, but I won't hide from what's real. No answer came, but she imagined the older woman reading it across the ocean, lips pursed, maybe the smallest smile breaking her composure. Aaliyah set the phone down and looked out at the horizon. The sunlight shimmered on the waves like a promise. For the first time since it all began, she didn't feel trapped by the attention. She felt part of something larger, a story that frightened her but also felt impossibly alive. Morning light spilled across the small apartment, catching on the half-packed suitcase open on the bed. Aaliyah stood beside it, a coffee cup in one hand, her phone in the other, staring at the airline confirmation screen. One click, and she'd be on a flight to Seoul that evening. She'd never imagined crossing the ocean for anyone. Her life had always been carefully self-contained, freelance projects, coffee runs, quiet nights, sketching new designs. But now every corner of her world hummed with his absence. The night before, she'd watched his statement again. Not for the words this time, but for the look in his eyes. The steadiness. The way he'd carried her name without ever speaking it. Something inside her had shifted. If he could face the world for her, the least she could do was stand by his side when the world turned its back on him. Her phone buzzed. Mia, of course. Mia, you're really doing this? Girl, Seoul is like a whole planet away. Aaliyah, I have to see him, even if it's just once more. Mia, you're out of your mind. Aaliyah, maybe, but at least I'm his kind of crazy. Mia's reply came with a string of heart emojis and an airport checklist. Aaliyah smiled faintly, setting her cup down and folding another blouse. She hesitated at her laptop, the cracked one from the day they met, then slipped it gently into her bag. A small piece of their beginning. By afternoon, she was at the airport, her hoodie pulled up, sunglasses hiding her face. She hadn't told anyone else, not even her mother back in Atlanta. She didn't want to explain something that still felt half dream, half destiny. At the gate, she found herself scrolling through old messages with Minjun. Their thread was short but full of small warmths, his dry humor, his apologies for late replies, her teasing notes about his obsession with black coffee. She stopped at one from weeks ago. You make chaos sound like music. She closed her eyes, whispering to the memory, you'd better still believe that. When the boarding announcement echoed through the terminal, Aaliyah's heart hammered. The decision felt heavier than any luggage she carried, but it also felt right. As she handed over her passport, she felt a strange calm wash over her. Whatever waited on the other side, anger, press, maybe even heartbreak, she would face it. Because love wasn't safety. It was courage. The plane doors closed, the engines roared, and as the ground fell away beneath her, Aaliyah exhaled the fear she'd been holding since the day he bumped into her in that Florida hotel lobby. The boardroom gleamed like a gallery. Glass walls, brushed steel, the city spread beneath them like a silver map. Minjun stood at the head of the long table, jacket off, sleeves rolled, every muscle drawn tight against the hum of conversation around him. The directors spoke over one another, percentages, reputations, legal exposure, but he heard none of it. His eyes kept drifting to the rain beginning to trail down the windows. Mr. Kong, one of the older men said, we must restore confidence. An official apology, perhaps, something that distances the company from emotional distractions. Minjun's jaw flexed. An apology for what? For telling the truth. Silence prickled. Someone coughed. Another director sighed. For letting sentiment interfere with business. Before he could answer, the door opened quietly. His grandmother stepped in. Every head bowed slightly. Mrs. Kong moved to the far end of the table, regal in her dark hanbok-inspired suit, eyes sharp as winter glass. "Gentlemen," she said, "my grandson has already addressed the public. What remains is how this board will respond, with fear or with dignity." Her gaze swept to Minjun. "May I have a word with you? Alone." When the room emptied, she studied him for a long moment. "You've set the river against its banks," she said finally. "It will either flood or carve a new path. I can't decide whether to scold you or to be proud." "Maybe both," he said quietly. "Do you love her?" "Yes." "Then be ready to protect her. The press will not rest, and Ethan," she paused, the name heavy. "Ethan smells weakness." Minjun nodded once. "Then we give him none." Incheon International Airport. The same rain touched the glass walls of the arrivals hall, soft and steady. Aaliyah stepped out into it, the air sharp with jet fuel and monsoon mist. Everything felt too bright, too fast, signs in Hangul flashing, announcements echoing. She pulled her hood up, gripping the handle of her small suitcase. No one here knew who she was, no one stared. It was a strange kind of freedom. At the taxi stand, she opened her phone. One unread message blinked from an international number she didn't recognize. "Welcome to Seoul. Someone will meet you at the gate." Mrs. Kang's request. Her breath caught. How did the older woman know she'd come? She looked around the crowd until she spotted a young man holding a discreet placard with her name printed in neat Korean characters. Aaliyah James. He bowed slightly. "Ms. James?" "Mrs. Kong sends her car." Aaliyah hesitated only a second before following him through the sliding doors into the wet night. Global boardroom. A phone buzzed on the table beside Minjun. His assistant leaned in and whispered, "Sir, she's here." For the first time that day, his composure broke, just a flicker, a breath caught halfway between shock and relief. Mrs. Kong raised an eyebrow. "So she came?" He met his grandmother's eyes, steady again now. Then the flood has chosen its path. The drive wound upward through the misted hills on the northern edge of Seoul. Aaliyah sat in the back of the sedan, the city's glass towers falling away behind her as quiet roads curved between pine trees. The rain had softened into a drifting fog that caught the headlights like gauze. When the car stopped, she saw a wide gate open to a compound of low-roofed Hanok buildings and modern glass extensions. Old Seoul meeting the new. The air smelled faintly of cedar and rain. The driver led her through a courtyard where stone lanterns glowed pale in the dusk. Inside, a single figure waited beside a wall of calligraphy scrolls. Mrs. Kong, poised, her silver hair pulled neatly back, a shawl folded over her arms. "Miss James," she said in English touched with the rhythm of soul. "Welcome." Aaliyah bowed slightly, unsure of the formality. "Thank you for inviting me."
Come, sit.
"Tea will help with the jet lag." The older woman poured 2 cups herself, the steam curling between them. For a moment, neither spoke. Only the faint sound of rain tapping on the tiled roof. Aaliyah glanced around the room. Photographs of distant mountains, a framed newspaper article about Global's founding. "It's beautiful here," she said softly. "It was my husband's dream," Mrs. Kong replied. "He believed a house should teach patience. I still try to learn." She looked across at Aaliyah. "I imagine patience is not easy for you either." Aaliyah smiled a little. "Not lately." Something eased in the older woman's expression. "You remind me of him when he was young," she said. Stubborn. Certain that the heart and the world could live in the same room. "I'm not sure they can," Aaliyah admitted. "But I'd like to try." Mrs. Kong set her cup down. "You came here knowing what people will say, what it may cost him. That takes courage." "I didn't come to cause more trouble," Aaliyah said quickly. I came because he didn't deserve to face it alone. For the first time, Mrs. Kong smiled, a small, genuine curve of her lips. You speak with care. That is good. Care is rarer than bravery.
Thank you for watching. Episode 3 ends here. If you enjoyed the story, leave us a comment, like, share, and subscribe to our channel, and click on your notification bell to get notified whenever a new story is made.